Memphis, Tennessee is best known as the birthplace of the blues, but for a long time it held a dark secret, the highest crime rate in the entire country. Dr. O'Brien Cleary Smith knows the secrets of these streets better than anyone else. Dr. Smith dedicated his life to a job most people would consider far too grim. He was the chief medical examiner of Shelby County. Calling Dr. Smith an interesting man would be an understatement. Born in 1952, he served as a military surgeon in the Navy and took part in numerous combat operations, including Operation Desert Storm. Rumor had it that he was even a mercenary at one point. After his military service, he became a pathologist and later the chief medical examiner in Shelby County, Tennessee. His colleagues admired his tireless work ethic. He would race to crime scenes at any hour, day or night, and did everything his job required. It's no surprise he worked on some of the city's most high-profile criminal cases. His professionalism made him the most sought-after expert in court, where he testified with brilliance, explaining complex matters in a way jurors could easily understand. Although Dr. Smith was highly respected, his work was not without controversy. He never hid the fact that he always sided with law enforcement and often worked hard to build evidence against the accused, a stance that may have angered some dangerous or powerful people. One of the most controversial cases was that of Philip Workman. In 1981, Philip participated in the armed robbery of a fast food restaurant. Lieutenant Ronald Oliver, one of the first officers to arrive on the scene, was shot and killed. Police recovered a gun belonging to Philip, but the bullet that killed Oliver was never found or analyzed. Nevertheless, in 1982, a jury found Philip guilty, and he was sentenced to death. He remained on death row, never accepting his fate. Philip admitted to the robbery, but insisted he had not killed anyone, claiming that Lieutenant Oliver was accidentally shot by a fellow officer in a tragic mistake. Eventually, he was granted a clemency hearing by the Tennessee Board of Pardons, and that's when Dr. Smith unexpectedly appeared as a witness, bringing new evidence of Philip's guilt. Dr. Smith had used a new forensic technique involving an electron microscope to analyze skin samples around the victim's wound. He concluded that the bullet had been fired from Philip's weapon based on the type of firearms used by police at the time. But other pathologists criticized Smith's work, arguing that the tests he conducted did not meet professional standards and should not have been admissible in court. Rumors began to swirl that Dr. Smith had intentionally influenced the case to keep Philip on death row. After all, he never hid his loyalty to the police. According to Philip, Smith's testimony sealed his fate, and many supporters believed the forensic expert had sent an innocent man to die. Despite public outcry, clemency was denied. Philip's attorney went to the media, publicly challenging Smith's findings. The case caught the attention of anti-death penalty activists, and then, in April 2001, strange things started to happen. Philip's lawyer, the district attorney, and a local reporter all received anonymous letters laced with religious undertones saying Smith's evil deeds on earth must end, and God is calling us to act. Police opened an investigation into the letters, but at first didn't take them too seriously. However, in March 2002, the police began to take the situation more seriously. One night, a security guard discovered another anonymous letter outside the county morgue where Dr. Smith worked. But this time, the letter came with a Molotov cocktail and a crudely made bomb. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but the incident pushed the police to start patrolling the area regularly, hoping to catch the perpetrator in the act. Despite the threat, Dr. Smith continued to live and work as usual. This made those around him wonder, was he incredibly brave or just recklessly naive? But eventually, even a man with nerves of steel, like Dr. Smith, could no longer remain unfazed. In the pre-dawn hours of June 2, 2002, an officer patrolling the area around the morgue noticed something strange. Dr. Smith's car was still parked outside the building, even though it was well past midnight. The officer didn't dismiss it, especially given the previous incidents. He was familiar with Dr. Smith's late hours, but this was unusually late. Concerned, he decided to check if everything was okay. As he cautiously approached the building, he heard cries for help. Entering the morgue, he followed the voice and found Dr. Smith chained to a window grate. His arms were spread apart, a makeshift crown of barbed wire rested on his head, and his legs were shackled together. Dr. Smith resembled a man crucified. Except this time, there was a bomb strapped to his chest, rigged to go off with any sudden movement. Terrified, the officer immediately called for backup. Within minutes, police and a bomb squad arrived on the scene. The bomb squad risked their own lives to save the victim. One of them literally held the bomb in place with his hands to prevent it from moving, while the others carefully disarmed it. One mistake, one wrong move, and they all could have died. Thankfully, the team succeeded in neutralizing the explosive device. The bomb was then examined closely. It was covered with religious quotes and initials, including the letters JMJ, believed to stand for Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. After the explosive was dealt with, Dr. Smith was taken to the hospital. The barbed wire wrapped around his face was removed in the emergency room. He had sustained cuts and burns, but miraculously avoided serious injuries. Since Dr. Smith's life was no longer in danger, and he didn't require serious medical attention, the police asked him to explain what had happened. This is his story. On the night of June 1st, 2002, Dr. Smith was working late at the morgue, as usual. A little after 10 p.m., he locked up his office and exited through the back door onto a dark staircase that led outside. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows to his right. Dr. Smith had only a split second to register the man's appearance. He was about 6 feet tall and weighed roughly 200 pounds. But before he could react, the man threw a liquid directly into his face. It burned like fire, and Dr. Smith immediately recognized it: sodium hydroxide, a highly caustic chemical that causes severe burns on contact. Blinded and in intense pain, he instinctively raised his hands to his face, just in time to be hit with a second dose of the burning fluid, which made the pain even worse. While Dr. Smith was disoriented, the attacker struck him in the side, knocking him to the ground. But the assault didn't stop there. The stranger dragged him down the staircase. At the bottom, there was a barred security window. The man pushed Dr. Smith close to it. Lying face down, Dr. Smith could feel the attacker begin wrapping his body and head in barbed wire. The pain was overwhelming. Dr. Smith was completely incapacitated. The man had brought plenty of wire, enough to bind the victim's wrists and ankles, and to fashion a kind of spiked crown of thorns for his head. Then he ordered the doctor to stand. The attacker produced chains and padlocks, shackling Dr. Smith's arms high above his head to the window bars, pulling them as far apart as possible. His legs were bound tightly together at the bottom. As Dr. Smith suffered in agony, the man brought out a small device, about the size of a soda can, and glued it to the doctor's chest using superglue. Then, for the first time, the attacker spoke. Leaning in close, he said clearly, "Push it, pull it, turn it, and you die. Welcome to the ranks of the doomed." That was when Dr. Smith realized the device strapped to him was a motion-sensitive bomb. Just as suddenly as he had appeared, the attacker vanished, leaving the doctor beaten, bound, and chained to a window grate, terrified that even breathing too hard might trigger an explosion. Frightened and alone, the pathologist waited for death. As he later recounted, at that moment, all he could think about was not to move a single muscle in his body. He tried to remain completely still, breathing as carefully and shallowly as possible. But he couldn't stop thinking that the mysterious stranger might have also set a timer, and that the bomb would go off regardless of how still he stayed. All he could do was wait. After about an hour, he could no longer stay in the same position. He began making noise, hoping someone would come. Around midnight, nearly 2 hours after the strange attack, a patrolling officer discovered the doctor. Later, the medical examiner expressed deep regret that he hadn't warned the officer to stay back. He hadn't wanted to put the man's life in danger, but he had been so terrified, so exhausted, so desperate for someone to help, that instead he asked the officer to come closer. News of the attack on the respected pathologist, especially one so bold and bizarre, spread quickly. People believed things like this only happened in books. Local residents were deeply disturbed. A madman capable of gluing a bomb to someone's chest was on the loose, and no one could guarantee he wouldn't strike again. The perpetrator had to be found, and fast. Time was working against the police. A special task force was assembled, including officers from various departments. Police and the FBI joined forces and treated the case as a top priority. Investigators quickly connected the attack to the earlier Molotov cocktail and anonymous notes. By building a psychological profile of the criminal, they concluded he was extremely persistent, determined to achieve his goal, capable of constructing a complex plan, and obsessed with biblical symbolism and metaphors. Meanwhile, Dr. Smith began to fear for his own safety. He got a guard dog and started carrying a weapon at all times. He refused all interview requests and essentially withdrew from the outside world. Detectives concluded that the would-be bomber was upset about the role Dr. Smith had played in the controversial case of Philip Workman. They decided to speak with Philip. It was possible he had acquaintances on the outside who might have launched an attack on his behalf. Naturally, Philip denied any involvement in the crime and even suggested that perhaps the attack wasn't meant as revenge, but rather to frame him. He speculated that someone might have staged the attack specifically to damage his public support. It seemed like Philip genuinely wanted to help investigators. He asked them to explain in detail what had happened to Dr. Smith. After listening to the full story, he sat in silence for a while, visibly perplexed. Then firmly, he repeated that he had nothing to do with such a bizarre act of violence, and he added something that left investigators confused. Philip said the whole story sounded too far-fetched to be real, and suggested that maybe the police should question Dr. Smith himself more closely. But the investigators dismissed the inmate's advice. Instead, they spoke with his family, friends, and anti-death penalty activists across the state. Despite their efforts, and even surveillance of some of these individuals, police failed to identify any viable suspects. To their surprise, Philip was eventually ruled out as a suspect in planning the attack. However, Dr. Smith had been involved in many other criminal cases, so investigators had hundreds of potential leads to pursue. But as they checked them one by one, the special task force seemed only to be wasting time and resources. For 15 months, some of the best officers from various law enforcement agencies worked the case, yet none of them were able to move the investigation forward. And as more and more pieces refused to fit together, investigators began to ask themselves, could Philip have been right all along? Was Dr. Smith truly capable of staging the attack himself? When investigators began examining this theory, they immediately focused on one detail. For an outsider, pulling off such a complex crime would have been extremely difficult. The mysterious man needed to bring with him many different items: barbed wire, a bottle of chemical liquid, locks, chains, not to mention the bomb. He stood on the stairs with all these things and then carried out the attack under very poor lighting conditions. The perpetrator would have had to know the doctor's habits, specifically when he usually left home and which stairs he used to descend. Not to mention how difficult it would be to wrap barbed wire around a struggling victim without leaving deep scratches, injuries, or blood. Also, although the doctor's eyes were irritated by the sodium hydroxide, the damage was not irreversible. This was first noticed by the medics who assisted the pathologist on the day of the attack. But the events unfolded so quickly that they had no time to seriously consider this at the moment. The more the detectives analyzed the case, the more inconsistencies they found. For instance, during his first conversation with the police, Dr. Smith said that the stranger first tied his ankles with wire, then his wrists. But later, during a more intense interrogation in 2003, his story changed and he said the man tied his hands first. One might have blamed this on the victim's nerves and shock, but Dr. Smith was a combat veteran. He was trained to handle stress. He was also in excellent physical shape for a 49-year-old man, yet one person easily overpowered him. The investigators did not hesitate to ask why he didn't fight back. Dr. Smith explained, "If you try to act macho, you could easily lose your life. You have a choice. You can resist, enrage him, and suffer the consequences, or surrender to his control." The wire didn't cause serious injuries because it was old and rusty. It could scratch unpleasantly, but not tear the skin. Dr. Smith voluntarily spoke with investigators for hours without a lawyer because he believed in his innocence. However, none of his explanations mattered. The investigators had already lost faith in his words. They directly told him that, in their opinion, he was lying and had staged the attack himself. After a year and a half, the investigation ended with an outcome no one could have predicted. On February 11, 2004, Dr. Smith was charged with possession of an unregistered explosive device and giving false testimony to federal investigators. The story hit the front pages again, but now he was no longer the victim. He was accused of orchestrating the attack on himself. The mayor reluctantly asked Dr. Smith to resign from his position as chief medical examiner. Dr. Smith was offered a deal: no prison time if he simply admitted to staging the whole thing himself. But if found guilty, he faced up to 20 years behind bars. However, Dr. Smith insisted he was innocent and refused the deal. He proudly declared he would never admit guilt. Dr. Smith hired the best lawyer and prepared for the battle of his life in court. Thus was set the stage for one of the strangest court cases in U.S. history, the case of the man in the wire mask. The trial began in 2005. For nearly 3 weeks, the jury heard testimony from 60 witnesses. The prosecution admitted they had no physical evidence conclusively implicating the defendant. Only circumstantial evidence was presented, such as minor injuries inconsistent with a violent attack, inconsistencies in Dr. Smith's accounts, the unusually complex nature of the alleged attack, and the absence of other suspects after a thorough investigation. The prosecution even demonstrated on a volunteer that a person could, if determined, wrap themselves in wire. Although difficult, the volunteer managed to do it. However, the main question remained, what could have been the motive? At the trial, psychiatrist Dr. Park Dietz testified. The defendant's lawyer did not allow him to examine Dr. Smith, so the expert gave his opinion in general terms. He spoke about the concept of so-called factitious disorder, a mental illness in which a person fabricates injuries or illness to elicit sympathy. The best-known form of this disorder is Munchausen syndrome, where a patient artificially induces symptoms to receive care. The prosecution argued that Dr. Smith staged the attack to portray himself as a victim hero. Some people have a psychological need for sympathy, attention, and care, and being a patient provides that, explained Dr. Dietz, who cited the case of Tawana Brawley as a vivid example. Tawana accused 6 men in New York of kidnapping, assault, and racism. After months of investigation, it turned out her accusations were fabricated, and she staged the attack on herself. The benefit of such fabrications is always psychological and usually helps resolve unique hidden personal issues, added Dr. Dietz. The prosecution also showed that Dr. Smith sometimes lied about himself. For example, he told colleagues he served in Africa, where his entire family was brutally killed, a story entirely untrue. Most of Dr. Smith's fabrications were related to his military service, but perhaps he just didn't want to talk about where and how he really served. Overall, the prosecution did a huge amount of work, but their weak point was obvious. There were no fingerprints on the bomb, no purchase records for barbed wire, no chemical purchase invoices, and of course, no witnesses to the crime. Dr. Smith's wife, Marge, many friends and colleagues, including those who knew him during his Navy service, they claimed he would never have fabricated the attack. Even morgue staff who criticized some of his organizational decisions tearfully said Dr. Smith was a true professional and that they missed working under his leadership. The prosecution could not explain why Dr. Smith, in his quest for sympathy and attention, would risk putting a real bomb on himself, a bomb triggered by movement. He could have died instantly and would hardly have enjoyed the effect he created. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Dr. Smith admitted to journalists that when he listened to the prosecution's closing argument, he himself was almost ready to believe in his own guilt. However, the prosecutor failed to convince the jurors. Only 3 jurors agreed with the prosecution's arguments. The rest were not so categorical and were even angry, feeling that the prosecution had wasted their time. The judge dismissed the jury. The prosecutor realized he was unable to convince 12 people of his case and therefore did not try to convict the pathologist again. But officially, law enforcement considers the case solved. In their opinion, the attack was staged by Dr. Smith. Thus, the trial was over, but Dr. Smith still had one more battle to fight to restore his impeccable reputation. And as it turned out, this was an almost impossible task. He was not allowed to return to work as the Shelby County pathologist, and the man had to take up private practice. He gave testimony in court cases on behalf of defendants. After the 2002 incident, he received no threats, but admitted that he feared for his life. Until the end of his days, Dr. Smith insisted on his innocence. He passed away in 2019. We will probably never know what really happened that night on the poorly lit morgue staircase. Either it was the doctor's own idea, which he brilliantly carried out without leaving a single piece of physical evidence, or a mysterious man carried out a daring attack and has since never committed similar crimes, remaining in the shadows to this day. In any case, this astonishing case continues to fascinate those who hear about it for the first time. No matter what, whether Dr. Smith staged everything himself or some fanatic attacked him, both versions are equally chilling. No one came to court with her, except, of course, the attorney appointed to represent her. She was 18 years old, but she had already been charged with a serious offense, one that carried a potential sentence of up to a year in jail. Such offenses rarely attract public attention, but her case was different. It had made her an object of curiosity and cruelty. It cost her the newfound independence she had begun to enjoy after years in foster care. It cost her her sense of self-worth. With each phone call, she lost another friend. They asked how she could have lied about something like that. Marie didn't answer. She listened in silence, then hung up. Even her foster parents doubted her, and she too had begun to doubt herself, wondering if she should seek help. She had reported that a stranger broke into her home, tied her up, gagged her, and raped her. But when police noticed several inconsistencies in her story, she agreed it might have been a dream. Eventually, she even admitted she made it all up. That's why she found herself in court that day. Her attorney was surprised the case had even made it that far. Her lie hadn't harmed anyone. No one had been arrested. No one had even been questioned. But perhaps the police felt they'd been used. and they don't like wasting time. The prosecution offered to drop the charges if Marie agreed to a set of conditions. She would attend counseling and pay $500 to cover court costs. Marie just wanted the whole ordeal to be over. She accepted the deal. On a cold winter night in 2011, Detective Stacey Galbraith approached a long, impersonal row of apartment buildings in a suburb of Denver. The frost bit at her cheeks, and in some places the ground was already covered with snow. But criminals don't care about the weather, and the detective had come to the scene to investigate a sexual assault. Stacey spotted the victim illuminated by the light spilling out of her first-floor apartment. She was young and appeared calm. Stacey introduced herself and invited the woman to take shelter from the cold in a nearby patrol car. The woman said she was 26, a student on winter break. The night before, she had cooked dinner and curled up in bed, looking forward to a relaxing marathon of Desperate Housewives and The Big Bang Theory, until she fell asleep. Around 8 a.m., she was woken up by a man jumping on her back and pinning her to the bed. He wore a black mask that looked like a tightly tied scarf, but she noticed he had light-colored hair. Threatening her with a gun, he tied her hands behind her back. From a large black bag, he pulled out clean socks, wet wipes, and bottles of water. Over the next 4 hours, he repeatedly assaulted her. He filmed what he did and threatened to post the footage online if she went to the police. Then he forced her to brush her teeth and take a shower. By the time she came out of the bathroom, he was gone. He had taken her bed sheets with him. The victim remembered one striking detail: a dark birthmark on the man's left leg, roughly the size and shape of a chicken egg. Detective Galbraith listened with growing concern. After taking the student to the hospital, the woman shared a thought that had already been haunting the detective. "I think he's done this before." Forensic technicians combed through the crime scene and the surrounding area. All they found were Adidas sneaker prints leading to and from the apartment. Driving home that night, Stacey kept wondering who this man could be. He was smart. He had made every effort to eliminate any trace of his DNA. Before leaving, he had even shown the woman how he entered her apartment through a sliding glass door and suggested she install a security bar to prevent future break-ins. The victim had even described him as a gentleman, Stacey recalled, thinking he would be hard to catch. To figure out where to start, Stacey did what many in her position would have done. She asked her husband for advice. Her husband was used to hearing stories like this. He worked in law enforcement too. But this time, something felt different. As she described the case, he realized the details were eerily familiar. "You need to contact my department first thing in the morning," he told her. "We've had a case just like this." At 9:07 a.m., Stacey sent an email to the Westminster Police Department. Detective Edna Hendershot, starting her day with coffee and inbox triage, read the message, and memories from 5 months earlier came rushing back. In August, she had responded to a report of a woman assaulted in an apartment complex. The 59-year-old victim told her that she had been sleeping when a man jumped on her back. He wore a black mask, tied her hands, and used her pink Sony CyberShot camera to take photos. He then forced her to shower. "I guess you won't be sleeping with your windows open anymore," he said as he left. The woman was recently widowed. But that wasn't all. Edna remembered that during that investigation, she had been reminded of another case, one that happened in October 2009 in Aurora, on the other side of Denver. There, a 65-year-old woman reported being raped by a man who had wrapped a black scarf around his face. He tied her hands with tape, took photos of her, and threatened to post them online. During the assault, he knocked over a teddy bear from a bedside table, one he forgot to take with him. A trace of DNA was later found on it. Detectives Edna and Stacey met in Westminster to discuss the information they had gathered. The descriptions of the attacker were similar, as were his methods. But a more significant lead emerged. The victim in Stacey's case remembered that the perpetrator brought with him a pink Sony camera, an exact match to the model stolen from the apartment in Westminster. After reviewing footage from surveillance cameras, police found one promising clue: a white Mazda pickup truck that had appeared near the student's apartment 10 times. However, they were unable to make out the license plate. By the end of January, the detectives decided to broaden their search. They discovered that in Lakewood, another Denver suburb, there had been an attempted robbery a month before the Westminster assault. But looking at the case from a new angle, they realized it was actually a failed sexual assault carried out by their suspect. A man in a black mask, armed with a knife, had broken into the home of a 46-year-old artist. He tried to tie her up, but she unexpectedly fought back. She looked him in the eye and told him he wouldn't get away with it. Then she began yelling out a man's name. The intruder hesitated, thinking she wasn't alone. That gave her the chance to leap out of her bedroom window. She fell 7 feet to the ground, breaking 3 ribs and puncturing a lung, but she escaped. At the scene, investigators found several pieces of evidence, including Adidas sneaker prints in the soft soil and a glove imprint with a honeycomb pattern. Marie doesn't know if she ever went to preschool. She remembers always being hungry and being familiar with the taste of dog food. She entered her first foster home at the age of 6 or 7. After that, she went through many foster families, and when she turned 18 in the spring of 2008, she decided she'd had enough. She wanted to live on her own. Her last foster mother, Peggy, told her about a program that helped young people find their place in the world. The program, among other things, provided housing. Marie was a little scared, but she moved into a new apartment and found a job at a grocery store. 6 hours on her feet didn't bother her. She was simply happy to live independently and finally be free of the endless rules of foster parents. She felt a kind of happiness she had never known before, the intoxicating feeling of freedom and independence. Around 9 a.m. on Monday, August 11, 2008, 2 detectives from the Linwood Police Department responded to a report of sexual assault at the Alderbrook Apartments complex. Other officers and K-9 units were already at the scene. Sergeants Jeffrey Mason and Jerry Ritgarn found the victim, Marie, sitting on a couch wrapped in a blanket. She alternated between being quiet and bursting into tears. With her was her foster mother, Peggy Cunningham. Marie, who had turned 18 just 3 months earlier, told the police that she had spent most of the night on the phone with her ex-boyfriend Jordan. When she finally fell asleep, she was awakened by a man with a knife. He tied her up using her own shoelaces, gagged her, blindfolded her, and raped her. The assault lasted a long time, but she couldn't give many details. Her memory of it was very blurry. After the man left, she managed to pull a pair of scissors from the bottom drawer of a cabinet using her feet, cut herself free, and tried calling her boyfriend. He didn't answer. So she called her foster mother, then her upstairs neighbor, who called the police. Marie was taken to the hospital where doctors examined her and found several abrasions on her body. After the medical exam, Marie called her former foster mother, Shannon, and told her what had happened. But she spoke so calmly that Shannon was surprised. Her suspicions grew even stronger when she saw Marie the next day. Marie seemed calm, even cheerful. When they went to a store to buy new bedding, she became angry when she couldn't find the exact same set. Shannon wondered how Marie planned to sleep every night on sheets that would remind her of the assault. Shannon called Peggy, and the 2 women agreed that Marie's behavior seemed suspicious. Although Marie had never been known to lie, they concluded she might be making this up for attention. On August 12th, the day after the investigation began, Sergeant Mason took a call from a woman who said that Marie liked to attract attention and that she doubted the assault had actually occurred. In his report, Mason did not name the caller, but it was Peggy. She had asked not to be identified so that Marie wouldn't find out she had contacted the police, but she said she wanted to do the right thing as a responsible member of society and not let police waste time on what might be a fabrication. Mason himself had begun to suspect Marie was lying. When she recounted the story a second time, she claimed that after the attacker left, she managed to reach the phone near her head with her lips and call Jordan. Then she called her foster mother. This contradicted her earlier statement, in which she said she had cut herself free with scissors before calling Jordan. Mason spoke with Jordan. He believed Marie's story, but said that she had told him she used her toes to dial his number while still tied up. Later that day, Mason contacted Marie and asked if they could meet. "Am I in trouble?" she asked the detective. On February 9, 2011, more than a dozen police officers and FBI agents gathered in Westminster to discuss the ongoing investigation. There wasn't much to report. After 5 weeks, there were no solid leads and no suspects. The DNA fragment collected from the teddy bear had yielded mixed results. It couldn't identify a specific person or be matched in the national database, but it could help narrow down individuals from a particular family if police eventually had a suspect. As the meeting was wrapping up, a young analyst stood up. She had found something, though she wasn't sure how important it was. She had gone through reports about suspicious vehicles spotted near the victims' homes. 3 weeks before the attempted assault on the artist in Lakewood, a woman had called the police to report a man sitting in a pickup truck near her house. The man had left before officers arrived. What caught the analyst's attention was the truck's location, parked in a field that bordered the backyard of one of the victims. The vehicle was a white 1993 Mazda, registered to a man named Mark Patrick O'Leary. Could this be the same white Mazda that police had seen, blurry and indistinct, on footage from the Golden case? Now with a license plate number and the truck's movements tracked, detectives had little doubt. This was their most promising lead yet. Over the next 24 hours, investigators gathered all available information on O'Leary. He had served in the military and had no prior criminal record. But in September 2008, he had unexpectedly registered an adult website. The investigators urgently needed O'Leary's DNA. If they could compare it to the fragment from the teddy bear, they could rule out relatives and link him to the crime scene. On the morning of Friday, February 11th, FBI agents began surveillance on O'Leary's home. Around noon, the suspect left with a woman. Agents followed them to a restaurant and later retrieved their used drink cups. At the same time, another agent knocked on the door of the suspect's home. He was supposed to plant a surveillance camera nearby and needed to confirm the house was empty. To his surprise, Mark O'Leary himself answered the door. Caught off guard, the agent quickly adapted and showed him a sketch of a suspect from an unrelated case, warning about a burglar reportedly active in the area. The man introduced himself as Mark O'Leary. Meanwhile, the man dining at the restaurant with the woman was his brother, Michael. The officers were stunned. They hadn't known the brothers lived together, or that they looked so much alike. After a rapid DNA analysis, the results came back. It was a match. The rapist was indeed O'Leary. But which brother? Or had they both been involved? Detective Stacy Galbraith rushed to obtain a warrant to search the brothers' home. She knew exactly what she was looking for: the dark birthmark on the attacker's leg. Sergeant Mason's experience told him that when someone asks if they're in trouble, they almost always are. He didn't waste time. He told Marie immediately that there were inconsistencies in her story. Marie tried to stick to her version of events, but under pressure from the officer, she admitted that she believed she had been assaulted rather than being absolutely certain of it. Mason and Ritgarn, without reading Marie her rights, demanded that she submit a written confession stating she had lied. Otherwise, they said, she would be forced to take a polygraph test and, if she failed, would be thrown in jail. Obediently, Marie wrote that the assault had been a dream. But the officers weren't satisfied. They made her rewrite the statement, this time declaring that what happened wasn't a dream, but something she had made up. Once they had that, the police left her alone, but only for a while. Soon, Marie learned that she had been officially charged and was expected to appear in court on a set date. That's when her life truly descended into a nightmare. Her closest friend from school created a website where she posted Marie's photo, real name, and phone number, along with an accusation that she had lied to police about being raped. Marie lost her job. Her friends turned their backs on her. She began spiraling into hopelessness. Peggy and Shannon didn't abandon her, but their attitude toward her changed. Shannon's husband even forbade Marie from spending the night at their house, afraid he might become the next target of a false accusation. But 2 months later, Shannon was watching the news and saw a segment about a 63-year-old woman who had been attacked in her home in Kirkland, on the east side of Seattle. The details of the attack were eerily similar to what Marie had described. Shannon immediately contacted the Kirkland police to inform them of the striking similarities between the assaults. She also urged Marie to reach out herself, but Marie was too terrified to follow the advice. Still, she couldn't resist reading the article about what had happened to the other woman. As she read the report, Marie broke down in tears. The detective from Kirkland got in touch with the Linwood police, but they told her there was no victim in their case, just a girl who made things up and was now facing charges. The Kirkland detective was surprised they had taken the case to court, but assumed the investigators must know what they were doing and let it go. At 8:15 a.m., Stacy knocked on the door of the O'Leary residence. 7 officers stood behind her, weapons at the ready. "Police! Open the door!" she shouted. After a brief pause, O'Leary opened the door. He looked surprised. Stacy pushed him up against the wall and lifted his pant leg. There it was, right on the inside of his left calf, a dark birthmark the size of a chicken egg. The rapist was in their custody. The search of the house confirmed the investigators' suspicions. They found a pair of Adidas ZX 700 sneakers, Under Armour gloves with a honeycomb pattern, a black towel used as a mask, and a large backpack containing a handgun, wet wipes, a pink Sony camera, and a collection of women's underwear, his trophies. By early March, digital forensic experts had managed to access the files on O'Leary's hard drive. There was a folder where the attacker had stored photographs of his crimes. From the first glance, Stacy recognized several of the victims, but then she came across the image of a girl she didn't recognize. She looked very young, a teenager. She lay on a bed, terrified, bound, and gagged. Stacy felt sick. How was she going to identify this girl? How would she tell her that her attacker had finally been caught? As she continued to examine the images, she found the answer. There was a photo of a school ID lying on the girl's chest. Stacy read her name and address: Linwood, Washington. 2.5 years after Marie had been labeled a liar, Linwood police located her in South Seattle and gave her the news. Her attacker had been arrested in Colorado. Only then did they hand her an envelope containing information about psychological support for sexual assault survivors and return the $500 she had paid in court costs. Marie couldn't hide her emotions. She felt shocked, relieved, and angry all at once. She filed a lawsuit against the city. After agreeing to a settlement, she received $150,000, moved out of state, and began working as a long-haul truck driver. She got married, and a few years ago, she and her husband welcomed their second child. Marie has forgiven Shannon, Peggy, and Sergeant Mason, who she believes genuinely apologized for how they treated her. Someone once asked Marie if she wished she'd never reported the assault. No, she replied. She wanted to be honest. She wanted to help police stop her attacker so that no one else would have to suffer what she did. Mark O'Leary pleaded guilty to dozens of assaults and related crimes and was sentenced to over 300 years in prison. He will never be released. Help me find my way home. My name is Paulette. I'm 4 years old. I have a speech and walking impairment and a scar on the left side of my back. I can't survive on my own. I need my parents. If Paulette Gabarra Farah were alive today, she would be 15 years old. She would probably be attending high school, showing a passion for drawing and reading. Instead, 4-year-old Paulette Gabarra was found dead under suspicious circumstances on March 30th, 2010. Lizeth Farah and Mauricio Gabarra Raha got married in 2001 in front of 600 guests. They exchanged wedding vows in a Catholic church in the small town of Lomas de Tecamachalco, Naucalpan, in the state of Mexico. Lizeth Farah was the daughter of Lydia Farah Morales and Bachara Naim Farah, an immigrant from Lebanon and a prominent businessman. From a very young age, Lizeth enjoyed the privileges of being born into a wealthy family. She attended the best private schools in Mexico City and eventually became an accomplished lawyer. Mauricio, for his part, became a successful businessman, thriving in real estate alongside his brothers. Soon the couple had their first child, a girl named Lizeth. On July 20th, 2005, Paulette Gabarra Farah was born. She was born at 25 weeks, weighing only 800 grams and measuring 35 centimeters. She was so tiny that doctors didn't believe she would survive. But Paulette proved them all wrong. However, while she did survive, being born prematurely resulted in ongoing health issues. Paulette had trouble speaking, and doctors predicted she would never walk. Once again, Paulette proved them wrong. She learned to walk thanks to equine therapy. After that, she fell in love with horses. Raising a second child wasn't as easy for Lizeth and Mauricio as it had been with their first daughter. Paulette required constant visits to pediatricians, expensive medications, and therapies. She couldn't form sentences and could only say mama, papa, water, and food. And even though she could attend daycare with other children her age, she still required medical assistance and constant attention. The last time Paulette was seen was on Sunday evening, March 21st, 2010. She had just returned from a weekend in Valle de Bravo, about a 3-hour drive from Mexico City, with her father and her 7-year-old sister. They arrived at their home in Huiculucan, in the state of Mexico, around 9 p.m. Her mother, Lizeth Farah, had not gone on the trip. Instead, she had traveled to Los Cabos with her friend Amanda. However, she returned home at the same time as the rest of her family. Later, Lizeth would say she clearly remembered putting her daughter to bed, kissing her goodnight, and leaving the room. The next morning, one of Paulette's nannies told the parents the little girl was missing. I looked in the bathroom, under the bed, in the closet. I couldn't find her, so I checked the parents' room, then her sister's room, and then searched again, the nanny explained. Erica Casimira and her sister Martha were responsible for keeping the family's luxurious 2-story apartment clean. They also took care of the girls. That morning, they helped the older daughter get ready for school and waited with her until the school bus picked her up at 7 a.m. At 8 a.m., they went to get little Paulette ready for daycare. When they found her room empty, they immediately informed Lizeth and Mauricio. The child was searched for everywhere, not just inside the apartment, but throughout the building, in the elevators, the garden, near the pool, on the playground, and in the parking lot. But Paulette was nowhere to be found. They spoke with neighbors and security guards, who also hadn't seen the girl. That's when they called the police. The investigation was led by Alfredo Castillo, then Deputy Attorney General, and Alberto Bazbaz, Attorney General of Mexico State. Forensic teams were immediately called in to assist the investigation, and soon the apartment was filled with officers and detectives. However, they found nothing. No signs of forced entry or struggle, and most importantly, no clues as to Paulette's whereabouts. The only possible point of entry was the window in the girl's second-floor room, but it hadn't been broken or tampered with. The family lived in a secured residential community, but neither the security guards nor surveillance cameras had seen anything unusual. Paulette's photos were quickly posted everywhere, and every media outlet began asking the same questions. Was Paulette kidnapped? Could she have wandered off on her own? Could she still be alive? While Paulette was considered missing, she became the focus of all conversations. This case attracted widespread attention, partly because so many children go missing in Mexico, and, according to many, not enough is done to find them quickly. But when a girl from a wealthy family disappeared, the authorities mobilized all their resources to locate her. Her photos truly were everywhere. "Help me find my way home. My name is Paulette. I'm 4 years old. I have a speech and walking impairment and a scar on the left side of my back. I can't survive on my own. I need my parents." That's what was written on posters showing the little girl's image. On March 27, several news crews were invited into the family's apartment. Lizeth, sitting on her daughter's bed, recalled what had happened that night. She had put her daughter to sleep, kissed her goodnight, and left the room. She didn't hear any strange noises during the night. The family dogs didn't bark, and everything seemed fine. The girl's parents, especially her mother, gave numerous interviews, pleading for the safe return of their daughter. "She's an angel, a beautiful little girl. She never cries, never throws tantrums. She's the most wonderful child," her mother would say. Paulette's mysterious disappearance soon led to one of the largest public campaigns in Mexico City. Lizeth repeatedly recounted that Sunday evening when her beautiful daughter vanished without a trace, leaving the family in despair. "But how could it be a kidnapping?" she asked. "If there was no ransom demand? Maybe aliens took her?" she once tried to joke. Or maybe it was Harry Potter? When Lizeth and Mauricio spoke to the public on national television, the entire country sympathized with the parents, devastated by the horror of their missing 4-year-old daughter, unaware that they would soon become the main suspects in Paulette's death. 9 days after the search began, on March 31st, Paulette's body was found. She was discovered in the bed in her own room, the very room she had allegedly vanished from over a week earlier. It looked as though the girl had been lying there the entire 9 days, wedged between the mattress and the footboard of her bed. Each night, Paulette had to wear a special orthopedic mouthpiece to prevent her from sleeping with her mouth open, and it may have contributed to her death. It was reported that when the little girl was found under blankets stained with red marks, the coroner allegedly exclaimed in shock, "They beat her to death. They beat her to death." But later the police declined to explain that statement. Most likely it wasn't blood, but fluid stains caused by decomposition, as there were no signs of sexual or physical violence on the body. According to the autopsy, Paulette died from asphyxiation caused by obstruction of her airways and compression of her chest and abdomen. Officials concluded that Paulette had twisted in her sleep and accidentally slipped into the gap between the mattress and the footboard, where she suffocated. A tragic accident, but still an accident. The case should have been closed and forgotten. Yet even now, over 10 years after her disappearance and death, the Paulette case continues to stir controversy and conspiracy theories. Few people believe the full truth of what happened that night has been revealed. What remains most puzzling is how no one noticed the little girl trapped in the bed for 9 days. Over 100 people entered that room during the search. Even Attorney General Alberto Bazbaz personally checked under the bed during the investigation. He moved the mattress and the blanket and saw nothing. Even specially trained search dogs were brought into the child's room, and somehow they didn't detect the scent of the body. It's hard to believe that forensic investigators searched the room multiple times and still didn't find her. Bazbaz maintained that the girl likely twisted in her sleep, got stuck between the mattress and wooden base of the bed, and died from suffocation. He reported that according to the autopsy, Paulette had been dead for 5 to 9 days, meaning she likely died the night she disappeared. But oddly enough, another analysis later concluded that she had only been in that exact spot for 3 days, not 9. The new findings contradicted earlier claims, such as the assertion that the body hadn't been moved after death. Worse still, the new evidence was never officially accepted by the authorities responsible for the investigation. Even more horrifying was the fact that relatives and family friends had stayed in Paulette's bed in the days after her disappearance, and no one noticed anything. The obvious question arose, had no one even changed the bed sheets once during that entire time? They had. The nannies changed the sheets multiple times, and the police even asked them to reenact their actions to test whether it was possible to change the bedding without noticing the child. The nannies insisted they would have seen the girl, both when they were searching and when they were making the bed, but she wasn't there. Apparently, the reason no one noticed her was the sheer number of blankets and quilts on the bed, which hid not only Paulette's small body, but also the smell that began to spread in the room. The police claimed that during the week they spent at the Guevara home, they searched every room, followed every procedure, and questioned everyone they could. Eventually, they concluded that the parents or the nannies who lived in the apartment were involved in Paulette's death, because only they were present when the incident occurred. They also discovered the parents had been lying from the start. It wasn't them searching the building for their daughter. It was the nannies, who checked every floor in hopes of finding the little girl. And it wasn't them who called the police. It was Mauricio's sister, who called after speaking with him. Erica Casimira, Paulette's nanny, would later testify, "After searching everywhere for Paulette, I found her mother sitting here drinking coffee and smoking a cigarette, while her father calmly searched a closet." Over time, behind the glamorous image of the couple, serious problems began to emerge, both personal and financial. The couple had such severe money troubles that they occasionally had to borrow from the Casimira sisters. Their marriage was falling apart. In fact, Lizeth had gone to Los Cabos to meet up with a lover and spent the weekend partying and drinking. By April, the couple's growing conflict became obvious. Only Mauricio's relatives attended the church service, while only Lizeth's relatives showed up at the funeral. The pair also began fighting over custody of their older daughter. Soon, the couple turned fully against each other. Lizeth accused Mauricio of orchestrating the entire situation. Mauricio, in turn, claimed that Lizeth and the nannies were behind Paulette's disappearance. Each of them, at some point, gave false testimony, said the Attorney General. That's why it is now difficult to establish all the facts and draw a clear investigative line. On March 30th, even before Paulette's body was found, both parents and the nannies were taken into custody, but not to prison. They were held at a nearby hotel where they were questioned by the police. Investigators concluded that Lizeth showed no signs of being affected by her daughter's disappearance. She was defensive, angry, anxious, impulsive, and displayed little empathy for those around her. Mauricio was also anxious, showed no signs of depression, but was evasive and unsure. They were hiding something, yet never told the truth about what they knew or revealed the exact details of what happened to Paulette. It was found that on March 23rd, Lizeth went out with her other daughter and was gone for 7 hours. No one knows what she was doing during that time. We are dealing with a lawyer, intelligent, bold. She always remained distant in terms of showing affection and emotional attachment. She lied, said forensic psychiatry expert Sandra Yadeum at a press conference. She had been working with investigators. In short, there are signs of psychiatric disorder. Upon hearing the expert's opinion, Alberto Basbas became convinced that Lizeth had killed her daughter. He did everything he could to build a case against her, but he had no evidence. The public also turned against the mother, believing she had gotten rid of her special needs child to regain her freedom. After all, it was Lizeth who said the now infamous line, "Even if I lose Paulette, I still have my other daughter." What detectives never told the public was just how poorly they had handled the investigation. They tried to hide their own failures behind accusations against Lizeth. When forensic investigators first arrived, they were only allowed to check for signs of forced entry, nothing else. Alfredo Castillo, according to reports, ordered them to stop almost as soon as they arrived. The crime scene was never sealed. Hundreds of people entered and exited the apartment, leaving shoe prints and contaminating everything. Moreover, friends and relatives of the family stayed overnight in the apartment. Some even slept in Paulette's bed. Police officers working the case were even allowed to use the girl's bathroom. The crime scene was contaminated in the most careless way possible, and any evidence that might have existed by then was rendered useless. What's more, investigators failed to mention that Mauricio Gabarra was close friends with Basbas. Basbas believed Mauricio's version of events suspiciously easily and never stopped blaming Lizeth. Lizeth later claimed in an interview that police constantly threatened her and that at one point detectives even pointed a gun at her head. Despite all this, Baz's plan partly worked. Everyone in Mexico City believed, and many still believe, that Lizeth, the cold, unstable woman they saw on TV, was the one who killed her innocent daughter. In general, the most common theories surrounding Paulette's death are as follows. Raising a child with serious health issues was too much for a woman who wasn't capable of empathy and lacked maternal warmth. Lizeth may have killed her daughter shortly after her disappearance and hidden the body somewhere in the apartment, perhaps in an air vent or elevator shaft. A neighbor complained that one of the elevators was malfunctioning, bumping into something. Also, a viewer noticed that the pajamas Lizeth showed in an interview before the body was found matched those in which Paulette was later discovered. Lizeth later explained the pajamas belonged to her older daughter. Mauricio and Lizeth were struggling financially and barely managing to pay for their apartment. They may have staged Paulette's kidnapping, hoping to receive ransom money from the grandparents or generous strangers. They hid Paulette in a vent and told her to wait. But when the case attracted massive media attention, they panicked and couldn't retrieve her, resulting in her suffocation. Mauricio himself had once told police, "I know where Paulette is, and I'll tell you everything, but only if you help me, because I don't want legal problems. I'm scared of going to jail. I'm desperate." That was before the girl's body had even been found. Killed by her sister Paulette may have been accidentally killed by her 7-year-old sister, Lizeth. Experts say the older girl may have felt superior to her sister and jealous of the attention Paulette received. Some believe Mauricio and Lizeth were arguing that night, and Paulette began to cry. The older sister may have tried to silence her and accidentally killed her in the process. This theory is supported by secret footage of a conversation between Lizeth, Mauricio, and their older daughter. It seemed as though Lizeth told her daughter not to say anything to the investigators or she'd get in trouble. Lizeth later claimed the words were taken out of context. She was simply warning her daughter to be careful not to say anything that could be misinterpreted by detectives. Of course, the nannies could have been involved, but no evidence supports this. And based on their interrogations and interviews, they did not appear to be guilty. Although it's possible they know more than they're saying, perhaps they were silenced. Under Baz's influence, public opinion turned harshly against Lizeth. But after reading several news articles in the book by Martin Moreno, many people changed their views. Certainly, Lizeth's behavior can be seen as strange, and she did act oddly in some interviews. But that doesn't automatically make her a killer. Did she feel relief after Paulette's death? Possibly, but the Attorney General launched an excessively aggressive campaign against her, maybe to cover something else up. There's also a possibility that Paulette's father was involved in her death. Some believe Paulette was already dead by the time she returned from Valle de Bravo, and that Baz, being Mauricio's friend, covered for him. No theory can be ruled out. Anyone could have been responsible. Due to the Attorney General's harsh statements, many believed, and still believe, that the parents were somehow involved in their daughter's death. Eventually, they turned against each other. Mauricio stated, "All I can say is that, for me, this was not an accident, but I can only speak for myself." In another interview, Lizeth cried and complained she didn't understand why her husband suspected her, saying investigators turned him against her. "They played with our minds a lot. Maybe he didn't trust me enough. I never doubted him," Lizeth said. In May of that same year, Baz resigned due to how poorly the investigation was handled, and possibly because of his inflammatory remarks. In May 2017, 7 years after the events, Paulette's body was exhumed and cremated, permanently destroying most of the physical evidence in the case. But many still wonder how many secrets remain hidden in the death of Paulette, secrets the public may never know. It was the Monday following Thanksgiving in 2019. In Ansonia, Connecticut, snow had fallen the day before, but the roads had been cleared so that residents could get to work without delay. However, one of the local daycare teachers had not yet arrived. Rosie, the daycare owner, was worried. Her employee, 43-year-old Christine Holloway, was never late, let alone missed work without notifying anyone. Colleagues tried calling her, but there was no answer. Her family also didn't know why she had missed work. By 1 p.m., Rosie contacted the police and asked them to check if Christine was okay. An officer drove to her home on Myrtle Avenue. Christine's apartment was located on the second floor above a 3-car garage. The officer noticed that 2 windows were open, which was somewhat unusual given the freezing temperatures outside. There was no sign of movement in the house and no one answered the door when he knocked. Everything appeared normal from the outside. Seeing no immediate reason to break in, the officer left. However, a bit later, Christine's concerned brother and sister-in-law contacted the police. The couple had called her boyfriend, Jose Morales, who said he had seen Christine that morning at 7 a.m. when she was leaving for work. Given that she had never arrived at her job, police officers returned to the house around 8:15 p.m., and this time, they decided to break down the door. Once inside, they noted that the home was very clean and tidy until they walked into the bathroom. There were also many children's items around the home. Christine was the mother of a 14-month-old girl named Vanessa, who was nowhere to be found. Police immediately got to work. Detectives brought in Christine's boyfriend and the father of her child, 48-year-old Jose Morales, for questioning. At the time, Jose was unemployed and living in the basement of his mother, Lydia de Jesus, and stepfather, Marcos Garcia, in Fairhaven. He already had 2 children from a previous relationship, Isaac and Isabella, who lived with him during the weekdays. Jose typically spent weekends at Christine's home in Ansonia. Jose told detectives he didn't know where his daughter was. He claimed the last time he saw Christine and Vanessa was when they came to his parents' house for Thanksgiving dinner on Friday, November 29th. Since then, he said, he had only spoken with Christine on the phone on Monday morning. Odd, because to Christine's brother and sister-in-law, he had said he saw her that morning when she was leaving for work. This wasn't the only inconsistency in his story. The second concerned Christine's car. Jose told investigators that she drove a gold 2002 Mazda Protege, but in reality, she had replaced the Mazda with a black 2017 Ford Focus about a week earlier, a fact known to both her family and Jose, who had even helped her choose the new car. Yet somehow he had forgotten this detail. On top of that, Jose downplayed their relationship, telling police they weren't that close and were connected only through their child. After about 40 minutes of questioning, Jose grew tired and said he wanted to leave. Police asked him to surrender his clothing for forensic testing. He was visibly displeased by the request, but complied. Officers immediately noticed a bruise on his chest, scrapes on his knuckles, and swelling on one side of his face. Police drove him back to his mother's house. They knew time was critical, and finding Vanessa was their top priority. They needed leverage to pressure Jose into talking. In this case, the leverage was his parents. In the presence of Jose's parents, police informed him that his girlfriend, Vanessa's mother, was dead. Lydia screamed and broke down in tears, while Marcos rushed to comfort her. Jose covered his face with his hands. A detective explained that Christine had been found dead in the bathroom of her home and that baby Vanessa was missing. It was crucial, the officer stressed, that Jose clearly state when he last saw them. Jose once again claimed he didn't remember, even though he had either seen Christine and Vanessa that morning or he hadn't. The police couldn't understand how he could forget what he had done just a few hours earlier. Finally, he settled on saying the last time he saw them was Friday, but Lydia interrupted, saying Jose had FaceTimed her over the weekend from Christine's house. Jose admitted he had only pretended to be there. He didn't want his mother to know he had actually gone away for the weekend with a friend named Hector. Meanwhile, forensic investigators continued working at the crime scene. Christine's body was found naked in the bathroom of her home. She had been brutally beaten, primarily with blows to the head. The murder weapon was not found in the apartment. At first glance, the house appeared very clean, but forensic experts discovered traces of blood on the walls, carpets, and even on children's belongings. Almost all of the blood spatter was concentrated near the spot where Vanessa's crib stood. Someone had clearly tried to clean up the crime scene. Wet cloths were found in a bucket, and inside a disassembled drain pipe, investigators found bone fragments containing Christine's DNA. The trash bin was full of empty beer bottles, yet no alcohol was found in Christine's system. However, strands of hair were discovered in her hands, likely ripped from the attacker's scalp as she fought for her life. That meant police had the DNA of a likely suspect. Based on the crime scene, the attack appeared to have begun just steps from Vanessa's crib, where Christine collapsed. She was then stripped and moved to the bathroom, where officers later found her. The autopsy revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to the head. She was struck at least 8 times, possibly more. The coroner received her skull in fragments due to the savagery of the assault. 5 of her ribs were also broken. Christine was likely killed either late Saturday night or early Sunday morning. Police quickly determined that many of baby Vanessa's belongings had also gone missing, along with the child herself. That's when help came from a local church donation center. One of the workers noticed blood-stained items that someone had placed in the donation bin, located just 3 kilometers from Christine's home. Among the items were a diaper bag, a bloodied towel, children's shoes, and a pair of adult sneakers. Fortunately, along with the items were letters addressed to Christine Holloway. The employee was curious enough to search the name online and discovered that Christine had been found murdered. She immediately called the police. Analysis of the blood-stained items confirmed that the blood belonged to the victim. Meanwhile, police officially declared Vanessa missing. The FBI offered a $10,000 reward for her safe return. They stated that no charges would be brought against whoever had the child. Their priority was simply getting her back to her family. Authorities also reported that 4 key items were still missing. Items Christine and Vanessa used every day, but were found neither at home nor in the donation bin. These included a brightly colored baby blanket, a teething ring, a Graco infant car seat, and a gray Eddie Bauer backpack. Meanwhile, on December 3rd, police conducted a search of Jose's parents' home. Among the man's belongings, they found 2 stun guns. Jose was taken into custody because he was legally prohibited from possessing weapons, as he was a convicted felon. He had previously been charged with fraud, drug distribution, and violating a court order. While under the influence of illegal substances, he once pinned his ex-girlfriend to the floor and threatened to break every bone in her body, even though she already had a restraining order in place prohibiting him from approaching her. After learning these disturbing details about Jose's past, Christine's family expressed regret. Although she had mentioned his substance abuse issues, she had never spoken about domestic violence. Still, they admitted if she had, they would have immediately urged her to leave him. Detectives continued to verify, or rather disprove, Jose's statements. He claimed he had spent the weekend with his friend Hector and had called his mother using a tablet. The tablet, which Jose shared with his son, was confiscated. It didn't take long for forensic experts to confirm that the call to his mother had, in fact, been made from the tablet, while Jose was at Christine's home on Myrtle Avenue. Police managed to locate Jose's friend, Hector Rodriguez, from New Haven. Hector initially confirmed that Jose had spent the entire weekend with him. However, when detectives started asking for specific details, like why Jose had called him on Monday afternoon, Hector grew nervous and was unable to explain what they had talked about. Eventually, he admitted that Jose had asked him to cover for him if anyone asked where he had been. In reality, Jose had stopped by Hector's place briefly on Saturday and Sunday, but spent most of the time elsewhere. Hector didn't know where. The evidence against Jose was snowballing. The owner of the house where Christine lived told police he often used the garage below her apartment as a workshop. In the past, he had never heard anything unusual, just footsteps. But that weekend was different. He heard loud noises, like someone moving heavy furniture, loud enough to be heard over his power tools. Another neighbor saw a police car pull up to the house around noon on December 2nd, the first time officers came to check on Christine after Rosie grew concerned and called the police. The officer knocked, looked around, and left. About 20 minutes later, Jose was seen exiting the house he claimed he hadn't been in. He walked to his car, then went back inside, appearing to carry something. Soon after, he drove away. That very evening, Christine's body was discovered. FBI investigators confirmed that Jose's phone had been in the area of Christine's home on the day of her death. In his vehicle, forensic experts found a black trash bag with red stains that turned out to be blood. Blood was also found on Jose's sneakers, and his hairs were discovered in Christine's hands. Finally, surveillance footage captured a Nissan Sentra matching Jose's car leaving Christine's home at 6 a.m. on December 1st and heading toward the church donation bins. But there was still one puzzling detail the police couldn't explain. On December 1st, the day before Christine's body was discovered, at 1:52 a.m., Jose made a call to 911. During the call, Jose mumbled the words, Myrtle Avenue, the street where Christine and Vanessa lived. However, he didn't give a house number, and when the dispatcher tried to clarify, he didn't respond. Then, a woman's voice could be heard in the background saying, "Stop, hang up, who are you calling?" Moments later, the call was disconnected. A patrol officer was dispatched to check Myrtle Avenue, but the street appeared quiet, and police had no way of knowing which address the call came from. Be that as it may, there was more than enough evidence collected. In February 2020, Jose Morales was charged with murder and evidence tampering. Bail was set at $5 million. The prosecution offered Jose a plea deal, but he refused and preferred to have his case tried in court. Christine's relatives did not object because they believed that justice would prevail. The trial began on April 7, 2025. Jose was not charged in connection with Vanessa's disappearance, but this information was allowed to be used in court despite the defense's objections. Jose decided to take the witness stand and speak in his own defense. The defendant told a completely new story that seemed to clarify many points. According to him, on December 1st, he was at Christine's house. He was in the bathroom when he looked out the window and saw some people running toward the front door. Jose called 911. He also wanted to jump up and close the door, which had been left unlocked after he went outside for a smoke. However, he was under the influence of illegal substances and couldn't move quickly enough or tell the dispatcher the exact address. Meanwhile, the men burst through the door, approached Jose, and hit him in the face and chest. He fell to the floor and lay there while the kidnappers grabbed little Vanessa. Christine rushed to protect her daughter. She fought with the kidnappers. One of the men hit Christine 3 times on the head with a crowbar. He was angry and swore loudly. Jose added some horrific details. For example, when the man was hitting his girlfriend, something was leaking from her head and splattering around. Jose tried to do something, but he was too drugged on illegal substances. All he could do was scream. Then the killers threatened him that the same thing would happen to his daughter if he went to the police. Jose admitted that he cleaned up the crime scene, got rid of the evidence, washed the blood, and even moved Christine's body to the bathroom. He wanted to dress Christine, so he threw her clothes into the washing machine. This was Jose's version, which the prosecutor saw as clearly inconsistent. Jose claimed that unknown men hit Christine on the head 3 times with a crowbar. However, the forensic expert counted at least 8 blows to her head. Moreover, Jose had no explanation for why the men left him alive, the witness to the kidnapping and murder, while deciding to kill Christine. Furthermore, the police did not believe that Jose's mind was clouded by illegal substances. Due to the large number of empty bottles found in the trash, they suspected that he was simply drunk. Supporting this view was the fact that he cleaned the crime scene and then got into a car to drive to the church parking lot to dispose of the items. He could not have done this under the influence of the illegal drugs he supposedly took. These substances last about 8 hours and affect a person so strongly that he would not have been capable of performing even basic actions. The prosecutor showed the jury messages exchanged between Christine and Jose before her death. Jose accused Christine of infidelity, insulted her, and even wrote that their relationship was over. Christine replied that she loved him, had no one else, and that he should not give up on their relationship. These messages helped the jury better understand the character and temperament of the accused. He was controlling and jealous, and considering his history with a previous girlfriend, also aggressive and dangerous. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and found Jose Morales guilty. He faces 25 to 65 years in prison, with sentencing scheduled for July 8, 2025. So, the jury decided that Christine was killed by Jose, not by some mysterious unknown men. But one question remains. Why did he call emergency services before killing the girl? Was he not in his right mind and afraid he would do something terrible and wanted help? Was it a tactic to mislead the police? And who was the woman whose voice the dispatcher heard in the background? Jose claimed it was Christine. The prosecutor and the police also believe it was her. But is that really the case? And the most important question, did he kill Vanessa? And if so, why did he take only her body? Was it because it was easier to hide? According to the police, Vanessa is still alive. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage showing that on the day of the child's kidnapping, Jose left Christine's house several times, but never for more than 2 hours. Moreover, Vanessa's belongings disappeared and were never found. Therefore, detectives believe Jose handed his daughter over to some friend or acquaintance. The belongings were likely needed to care for the girl initially. The police also found no evidence that she was taken out of state, but they checked the man's relatives in Puerto Rico to leave no stone unturned in their efforts to bring the girl home. She would be 6 years old now. The police shared an age-progressed photo of what Vanessa might look like at this age. Now that Christine's killer has been punished, her family can fully focus on searching for their granddaughter and niece. Jose stubbornly refuses to say where his daughter is, but it's much easier to believe she is being raised by strangers than to accept the thought that her own father killed her. A loving husband and a talented screenwriter answers a phone call and rushes out of his home in Baltimore, never to be seen alive again. Later, his lifeless body is found in a conference room at one of the city's hotels. Despite the years that have passed since Rey Rivera's death, almost everything about this case remains a mystery, from how he ended up at the hotel and why he died, to the cryptic note he left behind on the day he vanished, one that may point to an ancient Masonic order. And after Netflix featured this case in a documentary series, the wildest theories began to emerge. So who really called Rey that fateful day? What message did he hide in his final note? And who was Porter Stansberry really? A murderer or Ray's most loyal friend? At 6'5", nearly 2 meters tall, and weighing over 250 pounds, 113 kilograms, 32-year-old Rey Rivera was hard to miss. Young, attractive, and incredibly talented, he was a dream man to many, but to Allison Jones, he was a soulmate. An inspired writer, a gifted screenwriter, and a romantic at heart, he moved to Baltimore just to buy his beloved an engagement ring. "I truly believe he was my soulmate. He was the guy I saw in my dreams. I can't exactly explain what drew me to him, but that's how it was," says Allison. Ray and Allison met at a bar in Los Angeles in 2000 and started dating soon after. By 2002, they had moved in together while Ray was working as a screenwriter. But in 2004, Ray accepted an offer from his childhood friend, Porter Stansberry, to join him in Baltimore as a copywriter and editor at Stansberry & Associates, a financial publishing firm. "He wanted to make enough money so we could get married. He wanted to buy me a ring," recalls Allison. The couple relocated to Baltimore in 2004, where Ray began working on a newsletter called The Rebound Report, which focused on stocks that were struggling but had potential for recovery. Still, Allison admitted this kind of work didn't suit her husband. He didn't like working a 9-to-5 job, and he didn't believe in what he was doing, she explained. So in early 2006, Ray decided to move back to Los Angeles and planned to sell his screenplay titled Midnight Polo, a story about a young female polo player who rises to compete in the Olympics. But strange things started happening that spring. The couple visited LA to plan their move back, but when they returned to Baltimore, Allison noticed something had changed in Ray's behavior. He became anxious, an unusual trait for someone normally so confident. "That's when it all started," Allison recalled. "He began going everywhere with me. He wouldn't let me do anything alone." Though the couple had always been close, Allison noticed Ray had grown abnormally protective. She remembered how, about a week before he disappeared, she wanted to go jogging on a nearby road. Ray insisted on going with her. "I told him, Ray, it's fine," but he still wanted to come, she said. While she ran and he sat nearby reading, a man appeared. Allison recalled that Ray looked terrified. Although the mysterious man left without incident, she said her husband's face was filled with fear. Then a few nights later, their home alarm went off. Ray jumped out of bed in a panic. When Allison found him in the basement, she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before: pure fear. The alarm triggered again the following night, and once again Ray was shaken. After Ray's body was found, Allison told police about what she believed were possible break-in attempts. But detectives told her the alarm may have been set off by squirrels. "They came a week later and dusted the doorstep for prints," Allison said, "but they told me it was probably just a squirrel." She wasn't convinced. "You'd have to push the door for the alarm to go off. I don't think a squirrel could have done that." Despite this strange behavior, Ray never told his wife what was bothering him, if anything truly was. On the day Ray disappeared, May 16th, things weren't normal either. Allison was headed on a business trip to Richmond, and she remembered Ray was working on a video project for Stansberry, a freelance job he had taken after leaving his full-time position. At some point that day, Ray left the house with his keys, phone, $20, and a credit card tucked into the pocket of his shorts. He left in a rush, without saying a word to the family friend who was staying with them at the time. Allison Rivera never saw her husband alive again. After about a week of frantic searching and growing media attention, Ray's car was found in a parking lot near the Belvedere Hotel. Just hours later, a former colleague noticed a hole in the roof of the second-floor conference room, a discovery that led police to Ray's body. Rey Rivera's body was found in a locked conference room inside the Belvedere Hotel. A hole in the ceiling and his injuries suggested he had fallen from the top of the hotel, 14 stories above, and crashed through the lower roof. After her husband's disappearance, Allison checked Ray's office. There, she found a small note taped to his computer. She immediately recognized it had been written the day he went missing because she discovered torn scraps of it in the trash. The FBI deemed the note highly unusual, but concluded that it was not a suicide note. It was addressed to brothers and sisters and referenced a well-played game. The note mentioned several already deceased people, including actor Christopher Reeve and director Stanley Kubrick. It also contained a long list of people Ray knew, some family, some friends, and included a strange request to make them and himself 5 years younger. Allison found it odd that other important names were missing from the list. What was even more intriguing was how the note introduced the idea of Freemasonry into the case. Its opening and closing lines contain cryptic phrases associated with Masonic rituals. Curious, Allison searched one of the sentences online, and the results pointed directly to Freemasonry. Rivera's family and friends claimed his interest in the Masons came from their reputation for secrecy. But according to media reports, his fascination ran deeper. It was revealed that Rey had spoken with a Maryland Mason about joining the order. Just days before his disappearance, he had been reading a book titled The Builders about the Masonic order. And on the day he vanished, he bought Freemasons for Dummies at a local bookstore. Ever since Netflix aired an episode on Rey's case, amateur sleuths have been captivated by the mystery. One of the most recent theories connects the young man's death to the film The Game by David Fincher, in which the main character, played by Michael Douglas, falls from a rooftop in a way eerily similar to Rivera's case. The 1997 film follows a man caught in a reality-blurring scheme, culminating in his leap from the top of a building through a glass roof. The theory suggests that Rivera may have attempted to reenact events from the film. This theory draws a connection between the note left after Rivera's death and his fall, which was initially thought to be the cause of his demise, although the medical examiner ultimately classified the cause of death as undetermined. Internet sleuths noticed that the game was mentioned in Rivera's note. However, the note also referenced the Freemasons, family friends, as well as films, television shows, and books that Rivera enjoyed. The theory gained so much traction that one of the show's producers, Terry Dunn Muir, addressed it publicly. "I talked to Allison Rivera about it," Muir said. "She spent a lot of time with that note, as did the FBI, trying to determine if it contained any clues. She doesn't find the movie The Game relevant at all. She told me I know where every part of that note came from. What I don't understand is why they were all combined into this single letter. If Allison can't figure it out and the FBI can't figure it out, I'm not going to pretend I can." A recently released video, left out of the Netflix episode, suggested an even more bizarre theory, that Rey had been dropped from a helicopter. "I know it sounds crazy," said investigative journalist Stephen Janis, "but this is one of those cases that forces you to consider even the most far-fetched ideas. We don't have solid evidence, but given the hole in the roof and the fact that no one saw him enter the building, he had to get there somehow." Harry Shivers, a former hotel employee, agreed. "That's the only explanation I can imagine," he said. The new video raised questions, especially since no one reported seeing or hearing a helicopter. However, a woman in the area might have heard something. Author Makita Brotman, who was so deeply affected by the case that she wrote a book titled An Unexplained Death, The True Story of a Body at the Belvedere, lived in a fifth-floor apartment with windows facing the very rooftop where Rivera's body was found. She wrote that she heard a loud crash that night, but assumed it was just another city noise. Still, she made a note of it in her diary. Police investigators did ask some hotel staff if they had heard anything, but they didn't go door to door. Perhaps they should have. Brotman became increasingly obsessed with the case, partly because her apartment overlooked the crime scene. She watched investigators and forensic teams from her window. Once the police left, the scene wasn't even sealed off, and she was able to walk right onto the rooftop. In her book, she notes the hole in the roof looked stranger from the inside. It had damaged beams and a portion of the roof had collapsed. As for the helicopter theory, Brotman added that Stansberry had once flown to Rey's wedding in Puerto Rico on a private helicopter. Also, helicopters are common in Baltimore due to the city's major hospitals and high crime rate, so most residents wouldn't notice one flying overhead. Still, Detective Michael Bayer dismissed the idea. If you had someone in a helicopter and wanted to get rid of the body, the harbor is just 30 seconds away. Why drop it on a hotel roof? Rey's family even checked with air traffic control. There were no records of helicopters flying in the area that night. Skeptics, including professional detectives, also questioned whether Rey could have physically made the jump through the roof. There were 3 possible launch points: the main rooftop, 14 stories high, the parking garage, or the 11th floor ledge. The first 2 were either too far or too high to be feasible. Engineers estimated that in order to reach the hole from the rooftop, Rey would have had to sprint at 11 to 15 miles per hour, 17 and 24 kilometers per h, and push himself outward with perfect precision to travel the required 45 feet, about 14 meters. The 11th floor ledge was only accessible through a guest room or office. None of the hallways led there, and even if that's how it happened, No one reported seeing Rey. That alone is suspicious. After all, Rey Rivera was a strikingly tall, athletic man who played water polo in college and stood at 6'5", 195 centimeters. He was not someone you'd easily forget. "So I just can't believe it," said his brother Angel. Rey was someone people noticed. How could he walk into the hotel and no one remembers seeing this tall, attractive man? It's impossible. What made things even more mysterious was that the rooftop security camera wasn't disabled, but malfunctioning. Hotel staff said someone had configured the hard drive to continuously overwrite footage. So by the time the police needed the videos, the relevant footage had already been erased. Other evidence didn't make sense either. For instance, Rey's glasses and phone were found in perfect condition. The force that killed Rey caused devastating trauma to his body, so people were shocked that neither his glasses nor his phone had a scratch. Many began to believe the scene was staged and that Rey's body had been placed beneath the hole in the roof. Medical examiner Melissa Brissell also told Allison that the way Rey's shins were broken didn't match a fall. Even the autopsy report partly supported that suspicion. It stated that although the injuries were consistent with a fall, the circumstances surrounding the incident are unclear, and it is unknown how the decedent came to fall from such a height. The cause of death is classified as undetermined. Another major theory involves Rey's work for Agora Inc., which included the Porter Stansberry Company. Rey wrote investment newsletters predicting stocks that would soon rise. But according to media reports, he was unhappy with the job. Some stocks he promoted never recovered, costing investors money. Even before Rey was hired, Stansberry's company had already been under investigation. The firm had been ordered to pay $1.5 million for spreading false stock information and misleading investors through newsletters. Stansberry denied all accusations. Rey's brother Angel speculated that Rey may have angered someone powerful who lost money after one of his publications. Porter Stansberry, born in 1970, was Rey's childhood friend and a known financial writer and publisher. Although their life paths diverged, Porter didn't want to lose their friendship. He convinced Rey to move to Baltimore with Allison to join his company. Today, Porter still lives in Baltimore and remains the founder of Stansberry Research. He also edits the online magazine American Consequences, launched in 2017. In the Netflix documentary, Porter was never directly accused, but viewers were strongly led to suspect that he knew more than he was saying. The night Rey disappeared, he had answered a call from work, but the caller's identity couldn't be traced because it came through a switchboard. The show also claimed Stansberry issued a gag order to his staff, preventing them from speaking officially about Rey. Lastly, Porter refused to comment publicly and directed all media inquiries to his legal team. This silence made people suspicious. Only in 2020 did Stansberry finally speak up. He called the Netflix show misleading. "The reason I never commented publicly," he said, "is because I never believed there was a mystery surrounding Rey's death. He insisted he had done everything he could to help. It's horrible. You can't imagine what it's like to tell people I had nothing to do with my friend's death." When Rey disappeared, Porter claimed he hired a private investigator, offered a $1,000 reward to anyone who had seen Rey, and personally helped in the search. When the body was found, Stansberry said, "We were heartbroken and shocked, but once we saw the financial pressure Rey was under, it didn't seem so mysterious anymore." One Reddit user suggested an unusual theory. Rey's death was an accident. According to this version, on the evening of May 16, 2006, Rey exited All Bar through the back and walked toward a side stairwell leading to North Charles Street. Part of a decorative element fell on him, shattering into pieces after hitting metal bars and then the concrete floor. The room where Rey was found did in fact contain lots of plaster, even though the roof he supposedly fell through did not. Rey's phone and glasses were completely undamaged, even though the fall was from 46 meters, about 150 feet. His Sanyo phone with a glass screen and his plastic frame glasses showed no signs of impact. The location of his personal items near the hole was also suspicious. His phone, keys, sandals, and glasses all had different weights and centers of gravity, yet were found grouped near the hole, which wouldn't happen naturally in a fall. The size of the hole was also strange. It indicated Rey had to fall straight down, either feet first or head first. He was described as broad-shouldered with a narrow waist. A free fall from 46 meters should have made him fall headfirst, but that didn't match his injuries. Even if he managed to control his body and fall feet first, his legs would have shattered from the impact, and the body likely couldn't have broken through the metal components of the roof. As for the mysterious note, some believe it wasn't related to the incident at all. One theory claims it was a draft of a ceremonial speech Rey wrote while preparing to join the Freemasons, who traditionally include such phrasing in their rituals. If that wasn't enough, there's more. Terry Dunn Muir, a producer of the Netflix series, revealed that someone had shown excessive interest in Rey's computers after police took them. When Allison went to the station to retrieve Rey's computer, a detective told her someone had called multiple times, insisting on getting access to the machines. The level of interest in Rey's technology deeply disturbed Allison. And then there was the coin. After Rey's body was found, investigators discovered a small coin in his pocket. Allison had once gifted him the coin. She found it on a business trip, and it had a heart cut out of the center. "Whenever you need me," she told him, "just hold the coin and you'll know I'm near." He usually kept it in a bowl on his nightstand, but on that day, it was in his pocket. Why? Did Rey sense something terrible might happen that day? Did he know someone was after him, but didn't know how to protect himself?